Hi everybody, welcome to the Tartu, to my office, and we will speak today about the sea people, Merpeople, seals, and the Pharaoh warriors, which is one of the main topics for today's presentation. It is a complex phenomenon of folklore, typical to Nordic and Baltic, but also in European and also Asian people. We will start with Genesis and Exodus, which is one of the most important texts which speaks about freedom, slavery, homeland, being together, and about trust. The poem which you saw just now is written by Paul Erik Romo at the very beginning of 1960s under the Soviet Estonian government. So our today's speech is connected with biblical topics in folklore. Florentina Patalanova-Kellert points out that the vernacular versions of the Bible and other sacred texts are not often in the middle of interest to scholars and are ignored also by the scholars of theology and religious studies, who consider them marginal topic, which is paradox in itself, since the parabiblical stories are examples of real lived faith. Patalanova points out that the interest is rather unidirectional, from oral tradition to Bible to canonized text, or the scholars are using to make research about canonized text in everyday speech or also in folklore, but concentrating on the different genres and typology. At the same time, these stories are an inexhaustible source for the study of religion itself. The term folk Bible is used by Florentina Patalanova for many years. She is a scholar just now in London, but the term is also widely used in French, Slavic, Canadian, and other scholars. The other terms are quite close: Bible of a folk, used by Marion Bowman, or Utley, who at the end of 40s proposed that there are three different topics in Bible connected with folklore, and draw the attention that the third one, the tales which have derived from Bible and its silences, is under investigated and very important looking to the future. So our term for today is the Bible, which presents how biblical topics function in folklore and in folk culture in the context of narratives, rituals, customs, and also in iconography. The first part of Exodus story tells how Israelites escaped from the Egyptian captivity under the leadership of Moses. In folklore, the Moses was often replaced by Jesus Christ, or sometimes the Lord himself is replaced by Mary or by Christ, and so on. So the waters of the Red Sea divided before the Israeli peoples and closed over the heads of the warriors Pharaoh warriors. Just now, when we follow the folk tales, we see that the Pharaoh warriors drawn warriors turned into the creatures with a human torso and a fish tail. They swim in search of a Pharaoh and shout, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. And the next important topic, not only the etiology, but the next important remark is that the pharaohs or pharaoh warriors will become human only on the day of judgment. Some pictures which are describing the escape from Egyptian. So Estonian narrators actually recall the stories of pharaohs were told during the evening Bible readings at the home. And if you look to the example from Paide, it is quite in the middle of Estonia and after the Second World War. So the correspondent describes how the father read the Bible and retold the Bible story forward. They were chasing after the Israelites, were turned into fish, or half a man, half a fish, and they are supposed to moan till this day, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. So Loritz, who as our main recorder of folk mythology and folk belief, who started his work as a student in Livonian coast among Livonians, was very fascinating when he collected the first pieces of Pharaoh people, sea cows, sea horses, and so on and so on. So he proposed to collect the folk Bible in Estonia and realized that it is quite difficult because often local correspondents, they said that the story is too similar to the Bible. And it is like a retelling or paraphrase of a Bible. And they don't want to write about these stories and to send them to the archives. So the beginning is quite contradictory and quite awful, and it needed much of trust before the path was opened before the eyes of Israelites and so on. If we look to the folklore about the Pharaoh warriors, we can see that they were widely known in European folklore, almost in all areas, all states, among all nations. It's true that the main storylines, the continuation of Pharaoh warriors after being fish-tailed, it is different. And during at the beginning of 20th century and just recently at the beginning of 21st century, there are plenty of local investigations about the story in folklore and also investigation how the topic is reflected or folklore is reflected in the popular books and apocrypha, starting from very beginning of 13th century, but in printed books in different areas, especially during the 18th and 19th century. Here you can see the four printed books, popular books, which was orientated to the readers and to people who can buy the cheap booklets. And actually the text in all these booklets are the same. They are not word by word printed the same text, but there is changes in the titles. And they, in first look, they look like very different stories. So typically, of course, the people who happen to be the warriors, they are connected in Slavic tradition with the Black Sea and so on and so on. But mainly there is also important the original place. I mean, it means Red Sea and so on. How these 19th century booklets describe the Pharaoh people, it's also interesting. You see the titles which later on are repeated in the folklore. Horses and weapon turned into fish, and also what is made from this so-called Pharaoh horses, fur and skin and so on. But also these descriptions were human heads, but interesting is that there is no body, one head, but nose and teeth and so on. So if we are looking closer to Estonian stories, we have more than 400 recordings about the Pharaoh warriors and Pharaoh people. So we can see that actually the warriors turned to be, or they happen to be in different shape. They will be sea spirits and sea horses. A very rare text about dog-headed aquatic dwellers. Aquatic dog-headed dwellers are typically like described like war robbers, and here in these versions they are attacking and harming the ships and boats. Also fish and birds came out from the warriors: whales, sharks, fish, and mermaids, merpeople. The most popular is the stories about the seals who came or formed from the Pharaoh warriors. The same motive is also well known in the folklore of Baltic and Northern peoples. But interesting is that actually in the southern countries there were dolphins and other creatures who came out from the Pharaoh warriors. Seal is a hybrid creature and can appear as a half human, half animal body. So the intersubjectivity of the tales is remarkable. People are telling and retelling the stories which they heard from somebody. It was the discussion and dialogue basis, but also interesting are the transcultural and intermedia connections. Here is some examples. You can see how people saw the Pharaoh people on the pictures, in the books. They saw them, they saw the pictures also in the street corners in Tallinn. They saw the small sculptures hanging in the shops, and so on. If we are thinking to the 19th century and at the beginning of 20th century. I think that you are also sure that all these pictures are influenced not only by the Pharaoh's tradition, but also with the Merpeople, mermaids, and so on. In Estonian tradition, we can see many different versions, starting from Pharaoh warriors, mermaids or seal maids, and of course the seals, which is really important in Estonian environment. So I think we must look also to the area where the seals, northern area of the seals, is quite closely connected with Europe and Northern America. But actually the other type of seals, and I don't know, maybe they are also somehow connected in somewhere with Exodus. Let us see later. Other forms of seals are actually living also in southern countries and in southern hemisphere. But as I said, every nation found the most remarkable animal to connect with Pharaoh people's tradition. When we are speaking about the mare horses or sea horses and cattle, their spreading area is actually western coast islands and a small part in northern part of Estonia. But at the same time, the biblical background is the reason why all very well known topics and narratives are spread all over Estonia. Not looking to the confession, because sometimes the confessional background is extremely important in the spreading in the folklore pieces. But just now I asked Laura to help me and to demonstrate to you some of the basic topics in the seal tradition.
The basics are like Pharaoh who swims up to the ships or boats to ask people a question about the end of the world. The northern Estonian stories located all activities eastern by the Emajõgi River. My father told me that there are fish in the river Emajõgi that have such beautiful curly hair and a woman's face. It also has a woman's breast, but the bottom is like a fish bottom and ends with a fish tail. When you stand on the shore, it sometimes comes and asks, "Is tomorrow Judgment Day?" If you say, "Yes, it is," they are happy. They will immediately swim farther along the water. If you say no, they will be sad. They are actually human, and now they are cursed to be fish, and when they will be free from the curse on the Judgment Day, they are called the Pharaoh's fish. Another one is Pharaoh is released back into the water to take care of a child. A creature howls sadly. The fisherman searches for a person who can understand her speech. A Jew or a gypsy can communicate with the creature. It comes out of the creature has left an infant or small children in the sea who needs to be fed. In all the stories, the Pharaoh person who was caught in the net is released back into the sea. The soldiers caught the Pharaoh fish behind the Naisares island. After all, the Pharaoh's army had become fish in the Red Sea when they drowned. That fish was a human in the front, a fish from the behind. It has wings and all, and it spoke the Pharaoh language. But there was no such who could understand this Pharaoh language. But there was a crone that spoke to it, that understood the Pharaoh language. It cried just like a human, covered eyes with two hands, and cried. That old woman spoke to it. It said to the crone that I left a little 3-day-old child behind a grey stone behind the nicer island. There it was released. It swam fast forward to the nicer island.
So I'm very thankful to Laura because I have kind of respiratory virus and she gives me the possibility to relax a bit. So there are also a third very important thing which is a story topic, which is motive, which is actually connected with demonstration at exhibitions. They are basically personal experience stories, sometimes highlighted by eyewitnesses and sometimes retold kind of kin stories or family stories, stories of previous narrators and so on. Typical is that the Estonians were able to see the Pharaoh peoples in cities. In Estonian bigger cities, but also in St. Petersburg, which was a capital city for Imperial Russia at the 19th century times and also later in Riga, which was a very important economical, closest big economical city, and in different places also in Russia, because Estonian soldiers during the Imperial Russian times, they, as well as actually during the Soviet times, they served in Imperial uh, uh, war forces. So also in zoos, in Tallinn and so on, in Firth, in museums, again museums, of course, St. Petersburg, Riga, Tallinn, and so on. But interesting is that the Estonians who, by boats and ships, several times visited Sweden, Helsinki, Finland, and other countries, also Holland was a very popular destination. They never speak about the cities or zoos in connection with Pharaoh people. So again, pharaohs who are nursing a baby on a rock in the sea, and a man who marries a pharaoh, which is closely connected with the tradition of Merpeople, sea herder, and so on. Or sometimes coming to the port, to the fishing place, and asking fish. Again, sometimes with human voice. So a close area, close topics are connected with the sea cattle and sea horses. Part of them again changed their shape during the Pharaoh and Exodus accident, but they are also living in the parallel world, in the water world. In Estonia, we see the sea cattle and sea horses, but also the freshwater animals. Quite typical are the meeting with the sea cattle or sea horses. And they are interesting personal stories, like also the stories where the water cattle or the horse comes into ashore and mixes with the ordinary farm cattle. And sometimes some of them go home, go to the farmhouse with the farm's cattle. They stay there for years, but return to the sea or lake after 7 years or after violating some norms, beating them or promising to kill them. Also the fairy woman, is connected with sea cattle, and she's coming from the sea world or Mare world, and they are following the cattle, also sometimes the horses. Um, and typically in the seashore there are two children, one of them the girl or a small girl, also old male herder. But of course the longer stories are connected with female who grows up and marries a farmer and so on. There are many more, sometimes with connections with Pharaoh, sometimes not, which are speaking from the prehistorical times, like part of coast animals and so on. The cattle, I wanted to draw attention that sometimes the connections are not and the influences are not coming only from the books and so on, but also from reality. Because if we are look to the color of sea cattle and horses, we can see that they are blue or bluish and so on. And actually we know that animals were transported from the shores of the Livonian Sea, from Livonia to Saaremaa. Some correspondents draw attention that typically the cattle in Holland, in Netherlands, are grey or white. Maybe the question is at that time, maybe actually they came in ancient times from Netherlands. Okay, but we know that actually in Latvia there lives a blue cow, a very rare protected cow, and I think it is a notable candidate for the sea cow folklore, like a original example. So just now it's a very endangered animal species. We know that this day, year before, there was only 89 animals survived, and which is also interesting is that they produce large quantity of milk, which was also the topic in folklore, but also that they can survive very well without helping human hands, without they can stay healthy in cold, rain and wind. And so one version how the artists painted and described the shepherd. I must say that at the beginning of 20th century, the sea shepherd was typically the nice urban person. So sometimes there was kind of dialogue. The farmer get legally the herd and so on. But interesting is also the versions of story where actually a seaman caught one herder in the net. They put him to the boat. Again, we can see the parallel stories in many countries, and also the complaining that or the sea herder was called from the sea that come home. Kall's herd is long at home, and he replies that he cannot come, his leg is tied to the boat, and so on. So the leaving of sea wife is quite unexpected and quite it happens quite suddenly. So for example, here you can see that the woman describes he's fishing with a man, and he describes why she laughs because of the making beer and what happens in the outdoor kitchen right now. So she disappears. And another thing which is very typical to all fairy female fairy wives is that she's asking about his where did you get me, about the origin, and when the man describes, replays, the woman will go away back to the sea. And also typical to almost all these stories is that the fairy female comes back during the daytime and helps the children. But just now we must draw attention also to the influence of modern times, to the um, different traditions, and it's very obvious in Africa, also in India, and so on and so on. But we made our choice, and Laura, who knows well Japanese tradition, are describing what happened in Japanese tradition.
Well, Japanese call the mermaid ningyo. They have a long and complicated relationship with the water lilies and hybrid creatures, and they're not even sure where it all came from. This illustration is how they were first described as. They belong to an ancient group of Japanese creatures called yokai, which is an never-ending, inspiring investigations where every time the mystery is solved, the yokai assumes different shapes and evolves along with humans, and they just keep inspiring us to ask questions. The same exact definition applies to Western people, and just as the Westerners, early Japanese people claimed to have a physical interaction with the ningyo. The earliest was dated 619 CC, near present-day Osaka, when fishermen ensured a creature shaped like a child. It was neither a fish or a person. Its name was unknown, and the previous picture was this illustration of the ningyo, and it is said to be genderless and more like a monstrous representation. It has golden colored horns, a red belly, a body like a crab, and has 3 eyes on the side of its torso. Along with the European contact led to inspire different versions to the Japanese imagination. The ningyo specimens that the Japanese craftsmen sold to Europeans were intended to satisfy the Western's expectations, just as the Western has revealed. The Japanese also began to despise the Merpeople as the upper body or beautiful woman with the lower half of a fish. Although the following robes uncovered missections of this Japanese mermaid that made her demise of her Western counterpart, she nevertheless confirmed to the 19th centuries the Western ideals of mermaids. The Japanese simply adopted Western modifiers into their well-known myths, imagined and work-wise. The Merpeople were the perfect vessels for such culture adaptation and hybridization. Here is another. This is how it was later described the Merpeople to be from the previous picture.
So, coming just now back to Estonia, because we have this corpus of more than 400 recordings plus Estonian Russian recordings, half, approximately 50, and so on. We can see that actually the local features are preserving well and for a long time. And we can see the typical Western or so-called Anderson and so on mermaid only in very late recordings from younger people and actually Estonian mermaids and also lake people and river people and river horses and river cattle. They are never hybrids, but they are more like a human being or they are water version of animals. So we can trace that Pharaoh's tradition was living folklore in the 1970s. It's quite late. It's after the golden period of folk narratives, belief narratives especially. And remarkable for this folklore and also thinking about the pharaohs, folklore, seals and so on was Mark Sosar's documentary Pharaoh Warriors in 1974, which shows Kihnu local farmers preparing for the seal hunt. The film is discussing about the sealing. The aim of the film was to help ban the industrial sealing. At that time, the seals were actually in the situation that they will not exist anymore because of industrial sealing. So those are actually also captured and demonstrated the traditional sealing with fishing rod and also demonstrated how humans harming the seal puppy to put on a hook, and when their mother came to rescue them and killed very brutal way. These brutalities was actually well known for centuries, but industrial killing and sealing was quite awful. So the film was very successful. So in Estonia, the sealing was banned. So no seal hunting anymore. But there is 5 countries in the world who have seal hunting. It is allowed, and it's including again Russia. But if we are looking, so we can see that at contemporary times the killing and trapping of seal pups is being banned in Russia and so on. At the same time, the times going on and Kihnu's cultural societies advocates that the seal hunting is very important to save the traditional island culture. And we have the third plan also, the third proposition it is that at the present time biologists actually demonstrate and they speak that the seals, several seal species are threatened by climate change. Their birth giving is failing and their population is aging. So it's somehow human effort to stop sealing, and again to support the seals as much as we can. So somehow it is a new look also to the old Pharaoh tradition, but also to new look to the animal and human, animal and nature connections. So thank you very much for our side.